Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. This one is going to be about more Legend of Korra, Runes of the Empire Part 3 preview pages. This time out, as you can see here, we have the Google Books preview, meaning we're going to get a much bigger, longer look at the book, but it is different this time though, because I personally have not been able to see more than that initial 16-17 kind of pages that are the Google Books preview. So they have their kind of standard amount that you usually see, but then most of the time you are able to go to the different versions of Google Books from like Netherlands, Germany, France, and so on. And especially if you use a proxy to come across as if you're from that location, you can actually see pages from like towards the end of the book, towards the middle of the book, and so on. This time out, I have not been able to see anything beyond that first 16-17 pages. I did get a look at like the sort of thumbnail, sort of very small, low resolution version of some of the last few pages of the book, which I will show towards the end, as much as I sort of can show them, because I was not able to sort of change the resolution or get a look at what the text is saying, but you can make out at least what's going on in the art, which is pretty good. So let's go straight in here. Again, we've seen the first 5 pages here already because the initial preview came out a few days ago. So if you want like analysis on that, check out that video, but I'll just very quickly go through it here if you haven't seen it. So we have Kuvira's return to Zaofu in the opening page. And the idea, of course, is that she's here because she knows she has the information that will help Baatar, who has the skills, find out a way to reverse the brainwashing. Of course, they also have Asami here to bring back and watch over because they need to reverse her brainwashing first, and that's why she's there. But they also had to sort of keep her under house arrest as well. So it's a very interesting situation here, as you have basically Baatar Jr., Kuvira, and Asami all under basically house arrest in Zaofu here. And immediately, 3 pages in, we get the reintroduction of Baatar Jr., surprising like that it's happening so early on, but I like the pacing. That part 3 has a lot to accomplish, and it's getting straight down to business here with this big reunion we've been waiting for. And of course it goes about the way you expect. Baatar's still very upset that Kuvira's back and that he still isn't over the fact that she tried to kill him. And you absolutely don't blame him for that, because even here, she's still defending that action. I feel terrible about what happened, but like there's just the fact that there's even a but there is pretty bad. Given that Kuvira's changed a little bit already, the fact that this is where she chooses to once again defend herself. But remember all the pressure we were under. I'm sure if you'd been in that position, you would have tried to kill my fiance with a blast of spirit energy. Never. I loved you, Kuvira. Very, very intense moment in the early pages that really gets across the idea. How does she feel about him? She seems to not really talk much here about their relationship, whereas he straight away, first page, is getting across, I really, really cared about you. I don't know if you felt the same. It's mentioned, of course, here that Sue told Baatar that Kuvira is trying to change, and from his perspective, she's exactly the same. So, as much as Kuvira has made some progress, it doesn't really come across that way to certain people, and she gets the door literally slammed in her face here. So, she's taken to her quarters, and Korra is going in to speak to Baatar, because even if he's not going to work with Kuvira, he still needs to know about what's going on with the brainwashing plot. They need to get him up to speed on what exactly the plot is, because he doesn't know about it exactly just yet. So that's what happens here. Now, we don't actually get to see the Korra-Baatar conversation, because we'll see later on basically Korra recapping everyone and basically what the result of that conversation was, but it isn't important that we hear it just because it is just a recap of what happened effectively. So then we cut over to a different scene here. Gaoling City Hall. Again, Gaoling in Runes of the Empire is where the first election, democratic election, is going to happen. So this is a pretty important kind of moment here. Wu comes in, and again, Wu was captured and brainwashed at the end of part 2. That was the big cliffhanger ending. I'd like a word, Mayor Ree, about the election. Of course, Your Highness, everything is right on schedule. In less than a week, the citizens of Gaoling will be casting their votes. There's been a change of plans. The election will take place today. And of course, there we get our first look at, post-brainwashing Wu with the kind of dead, blank look in his eyes. And I assume he's saying this in a bit of a sort of droney voice. Today, but the voters won't even know to show up. They're already here, and we see the crowd of brainwashed Guan supporters outside. For the good of the Earth Kingdom, I've decided that the move to democracy cannot wait any longer. Here's my royal decree concerning the matter. He says, in the interest of fairness, please allow me a few days to inform the other precincts about the change. Wu gets angry here. How dare you defy your king? My apologies, Your Highness. I'll go let the voters in. So the voting is going to happen like either right now, or they're just getting prepared for it to happen very, very shortly. So the plot is accelerating very, very quickly here. And I suppose it's going to be interesting to see as the plot goes on, if they're going to get there and find out that, oh, the voting's already happened. Because as we see, their plan ultimately is to reverse the brainwashing before the voting takes place. And it seems like the voting is like minutes away from happening, and it doesn't seem like the rest of the plot is caught up with it yet. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's any roadblocks in the way of the voting happening immediately. But anyway, we cut back to Zaofu. Cool shot there just of the outside with Naga and Prabhu there playing. That's just a nice little touch. I really like to see that, not forgetting that of course they'd be there but outside. Kuvira asks Korra, so Batar is willing to work with me. That's wonderful news. And Korra just explains the result of her conversation with Batar. He agreed to temporarily put his anger towards you, aside his anger towards you in order to help the greater good. He still feels guilty for everything he did when he was part of the Earth Empire. And Opal chimes in here and says, unlike some people, and trails off. Obviously directed completely at Kuvira, because we know, kind of almost out of everyone in the entire series, Opal is probably the one who is the harshest on Kuvira. And she has been that way since the start of book 4. She has been really, really frustrated about what Kuvira did. And obviously her leaving with Batar and what she went on to do has hit her, in a way, the hardest. So it's going to be interesting to see if this book manages to develop their relationship. Because obviously, like, Opal is Sue's, other daughter, actual daughter, but like, we're meant to view Kuvira as also being Sue's daughter. So these two were, sisters effectively. So you sort of wonder, like, were they actually like super close? And so that's why Opal feels so betrayed. We don't actually really know what that dynamic is. But Opal, who's usually so kind in a way, like that's one of the key, things you'd say about her character. It's almost like unlike her to just have so much attitude towards someone. It's obviously understandable for her here, but it obviously speaks to something much bigger going on. So I'm interested to see if we get proper development on that, and it looks like we do based on some stuff I'll show you later on in the video. So we cut to the next page here. But Batar made it very clear that once you two recreate Dr. Shang's brainwashing device, he never wants to see you again. I'll respect his wishes. So, you can tell Kuvira's a little bit, upset to hear this, but she just has to go along with things. This is the way it is. She's kind of put herself in this situation. She has to accept everything's not going to go her way. So Wei and Wing speak up here. If the goal is to put an end to the Earth Empire once for all, why don't we call in some reinforcements? Yeah, Guan's not such a hotshot. If we had the full force of the Metal Clan behind us, we could take down him and his army lickety-split. And Su just says, boys, we can't be seen as aggressors. If Zaofu interferes in another state's election, it would throw the entire democratic movement into turmoil. Toph, of course, speaks up here, not liking this situation one bit. What democratic movement? Guan brainwashed half the voters and probably the Earth King too. Kuvira says, if Guan controls Wu, he'll be able to wield influence over the Earth Kingdom, entire Earth Kingdom. It's quite a brilliant plan, actually. And of course, Opal has to respond to this. Yeah, I bet you wish you'd thought to brainwash everyone. Then you would still be in power. That's not what I meant. And interestingly here, Su speaks up, as if she is the mother of both of them. And like that's meant to be the case. And it's one of those kind of first times seeing it, of just her being like, can we please calm down here, you two? That's enough, girls. We need to let the vote go forward and see this play out. Toph says, "Don't get your hopes up, Sue. I pretty much forfeited that election the second we hightailed it out of Gaoling. Guan's got it in the bag." Baatar walks in, "Not necessarily. Assuming I can figure out how to restore Asami's mind, we can then use that knowledge to free Gaoling's brainwashed citizens. Once they realize what Commander Guan did to them," Kuvira finishes his sentence, interestingly, so they're on the same wavelength, "they'll turn on Guan and he'll lose all his support." So that's the hero's plan here, is to reverse the brainwashing and hope that that fixes all of the issues with regards to the election being rigged. Makes sense, but they of course don't know that the election is basically happening right now. The voters are being allowed in right now. And Sue says, "And you'll be voted in as Governor Beifong. Yippee." Now, we know ultimately Toph isn't particularly excited about this whole thing, and it really makes you question, like, what was exactly the motivation behind her actually agreeing to it? Because she flat out refused. And it is one of the more confusing parts of Ruins of the Empire Part 2, about the exact specifics about why she did ultimately accept. We know that Wu had the vision of Hu Ting in the swamp, and Korra and Wu both basically sort of manipulated that vision in a way, in the way they told it to Toph to kind of get her on side. But ultimately, apart from just Toph trusts the swamp and what it has to tell people, there was no real clear-cut example of like how this really affected her, because it wasn't her vision, it was Wu's. So unless she sees her as being able to offer something that will help Wu's swamp vision come true, it's kind of still unclear. I'd like to know more about Toph's kind of feelings on the subject. So Kuvira gets up and says, "I appreciate you agreeing to help," to Baatar, and he just says we should get started. So they're going to work together here, but he's still upset. She wants to try, of course, but he is still upset. So it's going to be an interesting one for sure to see this dynamic develop. So we cut a little bit later on. Baatar Jr. and Kuvira have been working all day. This nightmare will soon be over, and it's Korra talking to brainwashed Asami. She tries to touch her hand, but Asami just says, "Don't touch me," and Korra is of course very hurt by this. Sue comes in and just says Baatar is ready for her. So, "You've outdone yourself, Baatar. This looks almost exactly like the device in Dr. Shang's brainwashing lab. Having worked so closely with Dr. Shang, I'm familiar with her thought process," is his response to this. And we see that, yeah, they've built what is effectively something pretty much looks very similar to the way the previous device was. He just notes that, you know, it's all about the settings basically from here on out. And he does praise Kuvira at this point though, and says, "And your description of her setup was extremely helpful too. You always had an excellent memory." So that's an interesting one in that, like, there's no harshness to that. It's just a true statement, a compliment. I don't think it necessarily means they're getting back together like anytime soon, but it's something for the future. I think Baatar and Kuvira's relationship, along with just Kuvira in general, for me is going to be a long-term project. I don't think there's any way we're getting to the big moment really in a way that we want from Kuvira just in this book. There'll be at least another story before we get to, I think, the big moments with Kuvira we're waiting for. But hopefully they at least have something that leaves her off in this book with a notable kind of arc. But anyway, he says, "Now for the hard part, figuring out the settings Dr. Shang used to alter Asami's brainwaves. I'll begin with low-intensity electromagnetic pulses." So he turns it on. They're going from low energy to high to see what happens here. So Kuvira reads out the sort of reverse orders to reverse them. "You will no longer obey Commander Guan's orders. The Avatar is no longer your enemy. Your mind is yours again." Asami opens her mind, but she just says, "I'm only loyal to Commander Guan." We cut to, I suppose, a little bit later on in the day. Clearly they've been doing this over and over again as they've been increasing the intensity. We just get the same thing. "You'll no longer obey Commander Guan's orders. The Avatar is no longer your enemy. Your mind is yours again." Same thing just keeps happening over and over again. She just keeps saying, "I'm only loyal to Commander Guan." Korra is growing more and more concerned, as it seems like from the wavelength here they're increasing it more and more. And we just end with a shot of Asami's eyes, still the sort of, you know, dead look in it, showing that she's brainwashed, as it's now nighttime in Zaofu. So the impression that I get is that, like, they spent like an entire day doing this, and we were just told the voters will be allowed in So the voting is happening, isn't it? So they're going to be too late, even if they do free up Asami. They're going to be too late, and Guan is going to be elected. He's going to be the governor basically when they wake up, unless they manage to do something during the night. They find out like straight away. I'm very interested to see how this all happens. But this is where the preview ends. As I said, I haven't been able to get any full-size resolution images of any of the remaining pages. So this is just the sort of full standard preview up to this point, about 17 pages at the start of the book. Everything else is just basically some kind of preview sort of thumbnail images I was able to get a brief look at. So this is where I'll kind of say spoilers, because as far as I'm aware, these are 3 of the last probably, 4, 5, 6 pages of the book. So if you really are worried about spoilers from towards the end of the book, this is probably the time to exit the video now. Even though we don't have the text on these pages, just seeing any idea about what happens at the end of the book, you might consider it a spoiler. So just be aware of that as I'm going into it now. So you can see here, this is it zoomed in. I'll actually zoom out to it at its normal size. So this is it. It's a 128 by 192 pixel image, and I can't do any of the usual sort of URL sort of manipulation stuff to, just decide the resolution. It seems like it's very specific about, like, if you start to change anything, it just says image cannot be displayed or whatever. So this is the best we're getting. According to the URL, this is page 74 of the book. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, this book's longer than the other ones. It means like that's including, I think, like the cover, the preview pages and all that sort of stuff. The credits pages at the start. So like the first actual page of the book is usually like 5 or something like that. So realistically what we have here is like the last, I think this is like all but like the last maybe 1 or 2 pages of the book. This is right towards the end for sure though. So what's happening here, as you can see, is that we have the Order of the White Lotus guards. They have Kuvira obviously in custody, but it doesn't seem like it's ended on a note where Kuvira betrayed anyone or anything like that. It's just, Kuvira and Sue saying something to each other. Is it their goodbyes? I'm not entirely sure. But they finally have what seems to be a normal conversation. And it seems like things are all right. No one's particularly like angry at Kuvira at this point. It seems like there's a level of like, oh, it's kind of sad that like things have to end this way, as if like, I assume maybe Kuvira's being brought off to prison and everyone's actually a little bit like, after everything you did, is this really the way we wanted to go? And especially with Sue, she obviously is now really beginning to feel like, oh, like it's kind of sad that it has to end like this. Interestingly, Opal, you can't quite make out her expression, but it doesn't seem like it's the usual sort of incredibly upset at Kuvira like it's been for like most of the time we've seen Kuvira and Opal interact. Interestingly also, Korra and Asami seem to have kind of new outfits on here towards the end of the book. So that's interesting. And then, yeah, cool. Hug between Sue and Kuvira happens. Another dialogue back and forth with Sue speaking a lot, more so than Kuvira. There's a few bolded words in here, so I think this is going to be probably our like big Sue-Kuvira dynamic. It's going to be interesting to see what they say to each other. This is the page immediately following the previous one, and then the very last page that I was able to see is this one. And it's not the end, I don't think, because I think usually the last page of a comic says the end on it somewhere, so there's at least 1 or 2 more pages after this. So interestingly, the Ordered White Lotus guard takes off the cuffs that Kuvira had on at this point, and you can see her just kind of like stretching her hands out in the next panel. Opal says something to her, so it seems like she kind of has a smile on her face when she's saying this, so that relationship may have healed. So it looks like whatever Kuvira does over the course of this book, she sort of regains the trust of most of her family, which is going to be interesting to see. And I'm not really sure exactly what this is. Is this Kuvira before she goes in to face the results of her trial? Is this afterwards and we've got the result, but it's maybe something different than expected is happening. I'm not really sure. That's what you can't really make out here. Either way, we're in, I think, the corridor going to or from her trial. That's my interpretation of this. I don't really know what exactly to say beyond that. So, yeah, it at the very least confirms to us that they're not ending off the comic with the idea that, like, Kuvira is just, like, free or anything like that. It still feels like there's punishment for Kuvira involved here, and that there's probably still, like, a whole extra stage of her development left to go on. So I think a lot of people will be excited about that, and it definitely leaves them an option for a future Korra comic to go into, that Kuvira is not just going to be a one comic and, like, arc is fully done type character. We can return to her and do interesting stuff as well. So that's kind of exciting. I'm very interested to see how they just execute the entire plot, how everyone gets unbrainwashed, a lot of the key character development stuff, and especially, like, I want to actually know, like, do the elections with Wu and stuff like that end up going ahead, or, like what Hu Ting said to him in the vision, is it maybe a thing of Wu is actually running away from things, and he might actually make a good leader now that he has a better head on his shoulders? So, you know, there's a lot of questions going into this, but yeah, we'll find out in, like, just over 3 weeks when the book is released. But yeah, they're the preview pages. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. What were your thoughts on the extended opening preview and the hint about what might happen at the very end of the book with those kind of preview thumbnails? But yeah, what are your thoughts on Runes of the Empire Part 3? But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.